Welcome back to Joe Stunner Boxing. In the past, people have left comments whenever I've said that I don't particularly care for trash talking. I don't find it entertaining. I don't find it amusing. I'm talking about people just throwing insults at each other, or tables at each other, or insults and tables at each other. It just seems to me to be very boring. Maybe it's the age I am. I don't know. But a lot of people leave comments and they say, but you've always said you like Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali was, the biggest trash talker of all. And there is plenty that Ali said that I absolutely disagree with. The appeal of Muhammad Ali is that he went from being a very naive, rather crude, or intellectually crude, naive person. The growth of the man, even before he retired from boxing, was really palpable. I mean, it was very noticeable. And certainly post-career, especially when he was very ill, he was still doing a lot of, great work in the world. But when he was a young man, he talked a load of shit, and a lot of it was garbage. And he didn't treat people like Joe Frazier very well. Nothing wrong with Joe Frazier, called him an Uncle Tom and all this stuff. But here's the point. Muhammad Ali was genuinely funny, and he was funny because of his wit. And they do say, what is the phrase? I mean, there are different phrases, isn't there, that brevity is the soul of wit, or truth is the soul of wit. Wit is not just insults. Wit is being sometimes so subtle that people won't even realise you're being satirical or you're making fun of them. And we've seen a little bit of that, much to my surprise, with Lawrence Okolie, of all people. One of the most boring fighters of the last 15 years. Oh my goodness me, some of his cruiserweight fights were just, Mogadom, it was like not watching Gerda's rust. It was like listening to Gerda's rust. Really terrible. And outside the ring, he's always been, comes across as being relatively confident. But, not the most thrilling of interviewees, is he? But suddenly, something's happened to him. And maybe not suddenly. Maybe it's been brewing for a long while. I think it probably has. But that something is Dillian Whyte. He just doesn't like Dillian Whyte. And this goes back to 2018, 19, sometime like that, back end of the last decade, when him and Whyte... Okolie, of course, was in the throes of his cruiserweight years, and Whyte was a heavyweight and a leading heavyweight, and Okolie said, I think we'll eventually fight. And Whyte took umbrage with this and started getting really insulting towards him, and I think there was a little confrontation between Lawrence Okolie and Dean Whyte, or whatever his real name is. And a lot of people said, Dean Whyte really put it on Lawrence, and Lawrence sort of shrank at that. And I think all this stuff has sort of fermented. It's kind of stewed, isn't it, in his head? And I don't think he's ever forgotten it. I think it's a case of him thinking, okay, you put it on me and maybe I didn't say what I wanted to say, but I ain't forgetting that, and I'm coming back at you when the time's right. They do say, revenge is best served cold, which I think is a pretty decent attitude to have. And so Okolie... he's now really putting it on Whyte. Now, it started with, the very sort of subtle sarcasm. Well, maybe not so subtle. You see, this is the thing. Sometimes you can be so sarcastic and so sort of straight-faced, po-faced, that the less, should we say, the less intellectual amongst us might take you at your word. And if you do that, if you keep a straight face and you sound sincere, and sometimes you can say the most outrageous things and people swallow it. And we see this in politics all the time. We see it in the corporate world. People talking a load of bullshit, but because of the manner in which it's presented, people swallow it. And Okolie, when it was Dillian Whyte's birthday, I can't remember the exact. I do have a Twitter account, but I never ever use it. I hate Twitter, or X, whatever the fuck it's called. I just think it's a lot of shit, but it's like a sewer, and I feel dirty getting on there. But I did see a few clips and read a few things that Okolie had said about Whyte, about how he was congratulating him on his retirement, and how his last two fights, which of course one was in Castlebar against a totally finished Christian Hammer, and then he had, was it Tete and Ebenezer Tete, probably as old as Ebenezer Scrooge, fighting in, was it Monte Carlo? Monaco, something like that, yeah. And he was, Okolie was saying, congratulations on your retirement. And I think the pay-per-views that you were involved in really, really did set the bar for, Riyadh season. And I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but the po-faced sarcasm was really strong. Whyte made some sort of remark back, like, "Oh, you're learning, son, you're learning," something like that. I don't think he even understood the comments that were made, maybe, or maybe he just laughed and thought they were quite funny. I don't know. But now Okolie's really starting to turn the screw, because there was an interview with our friend of the channel, Gareth A. Davies, who and Okolie, the subject of Whyte was raised, and Okolie said, "Yeah, he doesn't want the fight. He don't want to fight me." And he described him as being cowering like a chicken. Now, in the old Wild West, you'd have said, "Dem's fighting words." This is real good, the bad, and the ugly stuff, or at the very least, bonanza. And I think surely that's going to set a fire under Whyte's arse, because Whyte ain't going to take that as being a joke. The thing about Dillian Whyte is, and I do think he's overachieved in his career, because I think his resume is pretty good. And even though he got knocked out a few times, I do think he was a handful. And for a couple of years, he was certainly a top 10 heavyweight at the very least, maybe a top 7 or 8 heavyweight. But there's always been an element of the bully about him. He likes to bully people, and because he's from a street background, and I think he was a father at 13, wasn't he? And he was involved in all sorts of gang related stuff, and in South London, all this. I'm not going to go into it. I don't know the details, but it's like with the Tyson Fury fight. Whyte turned up with Dean Whyte and all of his South London crew, and Tyson Fury, of all people, was trying to sort of keep it nice and calm. "Gents, let's not all kick off." His lot, his traveller lot, and all the South London lot. So he's from that background. So that's probably his. And he said that back in the day, he always ran the risk of being shot or whatever. All this may be true, but there's always been kind of an element of the bully about him. He likes to get in people's faces. He did it with Lucas Brown. He's done it with a lot of people, a lot of guys. He likes to sort of try and impose his will on you before a punch has even been thrown, which a lot of fighters do. A lot of people have done this sort of thing throughout boxing. And Okolie, I think, there was that famous picture of him when he worked at McDonald's, when he won the WBO title. I saw a few articles about, from working at McDonald's to becoming a world boxing champ. And there's a picture of him wearing his uniform and smiling. And, he's from a more, should we say, a more conventional background. But that don't mean to say he's a weak person. And just because you don't strut around trying to be the loudest foghorn in the room doesn't mean you're a weak person. And it doesn't mean you're necessarily going to roll over for someone who is full of piss and wind and bluster. And I think that, bearing in mind the past that they've got, Okolie is now getting to the point where he's thinking, okay, the time is right. Now I'm going to put it on you, and we're going to see how you react to me putting it on you. As you know, if you get anyone, I mean, going back to as long time as I've been at school, but I remember at school if you had a bully, you had to stand up to them. Otherwise, they were going to carry on taking liberties. Even if you took a beating, even if the guy was bigger than you, you might get slapped around a bit, but you had to keep going forward, because otherwise they think that they continue taking liberties. And Okolie has sort of had his moment where he sort of stepped back and said, "Oh, you carry on with your image, but when the time is right, I'm going to spring." And that time seems to be now, because I would love to see Okolie versus Whyte. I think that'd be a very, very good fight, because Okolie inexplicably is ranked number 1 with the WBC. I mean, I did a video of this. It's just so preposterous, so ridiculous. I won't go into it again, but go and have a look at the video if you want to, that I did a week or so ago. But against Whyte, who, you know, who seems to be another of those PED enthusiasts, or he certainly don't like piss tests, does he? He needs, now, especially the age he is, he needs a name on his record, one that he would consider as beatable to stay relevant, because the fights against Hammer and Tete were just complete non-events. And I think, why not Okolie? Now, Okolie weighed something like 260 in his last fight, which was absolutely ridiculous. He had a big portly sort of stomach on him. Nothing wrong with that. But then I'm not a professional fighter, he is. So he probably wants to come in at 240, 235 or whatever. But it does look like he is, I don't know about reborn, but he looks much, much healthier, much fitter, much stronger, and he seems to be punching harder. And I would imagine his punch resistance is probably better now that he's up at heavyweight. For him to make cruiserweight not so long ago, it must have been draining him. No wonder so many of his fights were so fucking boring. It's because he probably just didn't have any strength. He had to sort of grab and hold. You remember the Chris Billum-Smith fight when he was on the floor? What a car crash of a fight that was. And yet it was so bizarre, so terrible to watch. You were sort of thinking, this is actually pretty interesting. You know, it's so bad. It's a bad fight. I'm kind of enjoying watching it. But yeah, I want Okolie to fight Whyte. I think the bad blood, this is a rare occasion where Okolie seems to be, getting back to my original point, he seems to be really coming into his own in the sense that he is actually quite witty. He's not just throwing insults. I mean, he said that he thinks Whyte is cowering like a chicken. That's pretty much an insult. But he does it in a way which is very sort of matter of fact. And, you know, he has the air that I think someone like Chris Eubank Jr. wants to have, but maybe tries a little bit too hard to have. And I like this version of Lawrence Okolie. I want to see him fight some decent names. I'm not saying he'll win. I'm not saying he'll make a splash in the heavyweight division. There's lots of good heavyweights. This is not a bad era for heavyweights, which people have been saying for years. It's complete nonsense. This has been for some time a very, very good era for heavyweights. But yeah, Okolie versus Whyte, I'd watch it. Anyway, let me know what you think. And yeah, give me your opinion on this. Give me your opinion on the Lawrence Okolie 2.0, to use the kids' phrase. I don't know what that means. And yeah, let me know what you think. I'll be really interested to hear your opinions. Anyway, thank you very much for watching the video. Quite a long one, this. Please hit the like button if you like the video, and subscribe to the channel, and spread the word about Joe Stunner Boxing, because we want to get to 6,000 subs. We're not, 25, 30 subs off it. Get to 6 grand. Come on. Spread the word. Tell your mates to join and watch the videos. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you had a good weekend. Of course, we'll speak again soon, and bye for now.